Hello, welcome to the Sencha Architect of Webspeed ABC presentation. I'm Jerry Winning. I work for Walters Clover Health. In this presentation, I'm going to show you how to build a web application using the Sencha EXT.js framework in the Sencha Architect drag and drop tool, calling an arbitrary web service written in the Progress Webspeed. Sencha EXT.js. To avoid the long description, to summarize, it's a JavaScript framework. It also provides a drag and drop interface called the Architect that you use to build your applications. It reminds me a lot of the Progress App Builder in both the good ways and some of the bad ways. They provide a lot of components, not just user interface components, but also things such as the JSON data store, which contains an AJAX proxy to access web services, return the data, to map it into a model with a JSON parser, and link it directly to the UI components such as data grids or combo boxes. And you can do most of this all within the Architect with drag and drop in setting properties. To show an example of what you can do, I'm going to show something that I had written, not knowing very much about EXT.js. This is an existing WebSpeed application that we have, an existing framework. The look and feel was designed years ago. And we wanted to add a page to pay our open invoices, and we wanted a richer interface than we could write ourselves using just WebSpeed. So on our Pay Open Invoices screen, you can see this is the EXT.js application running within an iframe. There is a data grid with expandable rows. So if I expand a row, I can see data specific to this invoice. It has a selection model where I can select one or more rows. I'm using the EXT.js's card layout so that I can continue on to the next screen where I choose how much I'm going to pay of my balance. Maybe I want to pay $2 for some reason. And what's kind of nice about the card layout, if I go back to select invoices, what I had done previously is still there. Continue forward again, what I had done is there. One of my pet peeves is those web applications where you type one thing wrong or go one place you shouldn't have gone and everything you've typed for the past 10 minutes is wiped out. And this is all just JavaScript in HTML. Another example, for a reason I won't get into, is in Salesforce, we needed to show some information that we were not going to replicate into the Salesforce database. We wanted to provide a web interface into our application, but embed it in an iframe in Salesforce. So this is our little Orion Web tab that's inside of Salesforce, where we have some sales tools, a list of the customer's current orders. Again, I like to use the expanding grid to show some information about that specific order. Scrollable. Whoops, scrolled right out of there. And the grid is sortable by default. Columns can be moved, all that fun stuff. Maybe I want to apply a filter. I only want to see the journals. Call the web service and get back the data. So this is some pretty cool stuff that I simply would not want to write in straight WebSpeed. So anytime you tackle something new, such as Sencha EXT.js, and you've never seen it before, I always find that 90% of the challenge is just getting started. I want to know how to build that hello world application, and then when I move on to more complex things, you have resources such as Google, and there's some great forums. You always seem to find that you're never the first person to ask a question around something like this. I don't know who that first person is, but you always type in your question and you seem to find the answer. And unfortunately, there is no 3-line hello world type of example that you can get in our world. We have multiple technologies. We have something providing a web service. We have something that needs to consume the web service, transform it into a data model that we can understand for our user interface components, and then we have to build the user interface components to show it. So in reality, Hello World is an hour-long session at the Pug Challenge rather than just 3 lines. So I'm going to show you an arbitrary web service written in progress, very, very simple. And then we're going to actually build an application using the EXT.js architect. So there's lots of room for explosions and things to go wrong here. I only make one guarantee about this presentation. Sometimes presenters that are truly experts, it seems like they maybe forget the simple things, and I get lost occasionally. I guarantee you I don't know too much about this. I'm not going to lose you. We're going to go through it, and we're going to build an application. I mentioned arbitrary web services a few times. In a nutshell, you have light web services such as REST, And what it comes down to is you call a URI, you get back some data. In our case, it's going to be JSON. In a REST architecture, you have a set of guidelines you follow. There's nouns, like the customer you're trying to access, and then a verb, such as I want to get it or I want to delete it. In an arbitrary web service, you don't have those guidelines. You're still calling a URI, you still get back JSON, and there's really two ways that you see most people doing it. Either the verb is built right into the noun, so you have a getCustomer.p, or you have your customer.p and you pass a query parameter such as method equals get, method equals delete, and things like that. For using it in EXTJS and Architect, luckily we have everything we need. You need to call, give it a URI to call, and it's going to get back to JSON and parse it. And of course, we want to handle some exceptions in case something goes terribly wrong on the server side. Personally, if I were writing a public API, I would probably choose the REST adapter. We do use it. I would recommend learning it. For this demonstration, Webspeed is so simple that I'm able to show it in a much shorter presentation, whereas the REST adapter, understanding its initially in its hello world, is a session in and of itself. I'm also going to show you how we wrapped EXTJS in our existing Webspeed framework. In existing Webspeed, we took advantage of host URL and app URL within a CGI wrapper, and it's easy and it works really well. We also have an existing security type of framework where we pass a session token around. All of our web services have to get that session token before they will return any data. I didn't want to rewrite all that in JavaScript. We have that. So at the end of the presentation, I'll show you how we have Webspeed calling Sencha. Now, Sencha does come with its own internal web server. We already have a development web server for doing multiple different applications. So for this presentation, I'm going to use my local IIS. I had to do my normal Webspeed setup to make IIS work. I had to turn on CGI. I had to set up my script handlers. And the one thing I kind of forget to do, and I always slap myself in the forehead later, is to add the JSON MIME type. And that's pretty much it. You're ready to roll. So let's take a look at the web service. For our simple web service, we're going to use a typical CGI wrapper. So it has the wrap CGI included at the top. And all we're going to do is build a temp table and send it, use the write JSON method to send it back to the web stream. So the end result is I want to have my URI being a call to Webspeed, calling my web services /doctor.b, and I pass it a method to get back some information about a bunch of doctors. I'm also implementing two optional parameters where you can pass a filter field. In this case, I'm going to pass series type or a filter value of new. This is not, if I was writing a public API, how I would probably do it. I'm doing it for the demo because I'm actually going to make a mistake in this where my dynamic query is going to fail. If I was writing a public API, I would probably say .p, I would pass a method of get, and I would want series type equals value. But this is a demonstration. I am not showing best practices. There'll be a few things that I do that somebody that knows what they're doing might say, what's that? And I'll point those out as we go along, as I just did here. So I defined the doctor temp table. We'll take a look at that real quick. It's just a very simple temp table, TT doctor, with a bunch of fields. Notice I'm using the serialized name attribute. When using the write JSON method or any progress method that serializes data and sends it, it's going to use the serialized name in the text. So we won't see TT doctor, we'll see doctor. We won't see doctor underscore no in the JSON, we'll see doctor ID. If you don't use serialized name, it's going to default to the field name. So we'll see doctor, actor name, series type, bio, and some other fields. So the first thing we do is do a get value to look for what method was passed in. We've only implemented if a get is passed. We're only going to display data. And when it gets passed, we run get doctor. Otherwise, we send an error out. Now, my error out program does an output header, sends a status. So we send back a 500 error plus some error information. And you also have to do it a second time sending a blank. Don't know why. It's just something we learned a long time ago. And if you don't do the second line, if you see yourself getting errors 502 with no information, this is why you forgot the blank line. Again, best practices. Should you return this much information if someone passes the wrong method? Do you want to give a hacker information that, hey, you didn't pass in a method, and that's what we're looking for. And this is not, or this is not. Um, Again, if this is a public API, you really got to think about things like that. But in this demo, we're going to show how to send back some information that will help you in the client to know what's going on. So the Get Doctor program that we run, internal procedure, we look to see if either of those optional parameters were sent, a filter field and filter value. We instantiate our database util class and build a temp table. So that's all this class does. We pass in the filter field and the value, get back a temp table of TT Doctor. We run the output header, which is slightly different than the standard output header that comes in the CGI wrapper template. We'll take a look at that. And then we send the temp table to the web stream with write JSON, send stream to web stream, and catch any errors. So first, let's look at output header before we talk about the catching errors. The major difference here is we send text/JSON rather than text/HTML. If you forget this and put text/HTML, Progress will put comments in generated by Webspeed, which is not valid JSON, and of course will blow Sencha up. The other change I made was I sent out a pretty name for the file. You don't need to do this. This is for the demo. When we actually look at this in Chrome or IE to see the JSON, we'll see a nice pretty name based on the serialized name of the temp table that we sent into this procedure. So completely unnecessary. Up above, we catch any errors. So my database util has an on block level undo throw. So we're catching errors here. So if we do have some crazy error in our utility, we'll run the error out program, passing in the message, and we'll get a 500 error with the error message. And that's it. We have a simple web service to return data to be viewed in whatever client we want. So to run through it again real quick, it's a CGI wrapper. We see what method was passed in. When it's a get, we call get doctor, otherwise error out. We look for some filter optional parameters. We build our temp table, run output header, write the temp table out to the stream as JSON, and we're good to go. So let's take a look at that. I'll copy and paste a URL. So calling Webspeed, doctor.p, method equals get. And down below, we see we've got a doctor.json file. I'll double click that to open up a notepad, and we see the JSON, doctor ID, as I promised it. One, doctor, first doctor, and some other values. If I happen to have passed some parameters, another doctor.json, and now we got less. We're starting with doctor number 9. So we're getting only the new doctors. So we're ready to move on to Sencha EXTJS and build an application to consume this web service.